ahead, Rick. Katie and the kids send their most love. They couldn't make it today. Jake's brother, my other two grandkids, out for
Oh my goodness.
11.
Oh, good for you. Me too. We don't see each other enough.
Clara, let's see, this last Wednesday, day of high school. She looks just like her.
She does.
Oh, uncanny. She looks like Mickey, and she looks like me.
Yeah.
Mickey's been on 10 years this year.
Yeah.
No,
She's not with Maurice anymore.
about 2 years.
Wasn't
It's all good.
Oh,
I tell you, I just fun.
yeah.
Granny is
Are
back.
you living in a little? Yeah.
Yeah,
Lois is here.
I sold that house 6 years ago. Katie, I helped her. She came by 1890 Rasmus House, and I helped her cut it.
Oh, nice.
Retired.
Then you retired.
Backyard, property, 600 square foot granny. I took one of them, cut it, and remodeled it. Now my grandkids are always there. Awesome.
That's awesome.
I was trying to see if I recognized the answer. No.
No, I don't think there's anybody.
All the girls.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen the girls for
She had a lot of engagement. On social festival. She's coming. Okay, so I'm going to sit here and find some space. And then we see each other.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I got to do one of those.
share the link to the live stream. I'll show you.
I said, yeah.
Yeah, with this one. This is Avi. And
Hi. Good.
everyone's gonna
We gotta find them. They're gonna start soon. Yeah, we're gonna go down that.
What chairs do I?
We're gonna go over here with follow grandpa. That's Ahmed.
Can you text me the link?
We all found pictures that we had. And then yesterday with grandma, we went through like boxes of photos that she had to find. That was really fun. It was really fun to find like Do you want to sit? You want to sit with your dad? You can sit with your dad. It doesn't matter. We're strategic because we have live streams, computers, don't work. Oh my God!
This is like weird, I feel like not a lot of African. Like, it's white like that. Like, I feel like I've never grabbed shit. Yeah. But then they look like they're like, you know, when you see in the history and you see the family like, and it's like, mom, dad, yes, son, daughter.
We just sit on these chairs like yeah. Do you want to Susan? Are we waiting for one? Do we need to come and Are you ready, Mark?
Where's Mads? Oh.
Like, as soon as these people sit, we're ready to go.
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
Or, well, you need to. Okay, I'll help.
Nice.
I have to switch it on. Oh. I can send it to you.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Mark, Lee's son. I know most of you. These things are always never on anybody's schedule, and just from the deepest part of our heart, thank you for changing your lives and changing your schedules to be here. I think it's sort of, it embodies and expresses the depth and the breadth of the impact somebody has on people's lives when people just drop everything and come to an occasion like this. So we thank you, and there's a couple other thank yous before we get started. First of all, thank you for everybody joining online. This is being live streamed and recorded. And so there are some people who couldn't get here, and so we thank you. We say hello to you and hope you can hear us okay. A thank you to the Sequoias. They've been unbelievable. You know, we tried to turn this around pretty quickly, and said we need a room. Yes, we can get you a room, and we need to bring some food. Yes, we can do that. But beyond that, and I see a number of you out here who live here at the Sequoias and are friends with my mother. I've been here many times and eaten meals here and spent time in various parts of the building. But this really showed me the sense of community that the Sequoias has. The day after my father passed, an email was sent out to residents explaining what had happened. And we came down to, I think it was lunch, right? And there was like a receiving line almost of people. And it wasn't this big maudlin affair. It was just people coming up, sorry for your loss, a hug, a knowing nod, and just a sense of we've got your back. And I think that's a special place. And my mother, it's not like she's lived here 40 years. She's a fairly new resident here. And to have that kind of friendship, kinship, understanding, I see some of you out here, Donna, Judy, appreciate, and also the help that you guys provided and advice in putting this together. I want to thank my wife, Yuki, here in the front. She does operations for a living. So when we were putting this together, I said, can you help us? And she's like, no problem, I got it. And then once my sister arrived, she could take over on the ground and do a lot. The amount of work they did was absolutely incredible and should be recognized. Grace did the program. Maggie is the tech expert here. Esther was gathering photos. Jeanette is here. She picked us up at the airport. Annie arranged airport pickups. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't want to forget people. Also need to acknowledge and thank the community back in Zimbabwe. There's a tradition in Zimbabwe that when somebody passes, you come express your condolences, and forgive me if I'm not explaining it properly, but you just give some money to help defray costs for a memorial or for gatherings around and associated with it. And so they came from Zimbabwe with that. And we are deeply, deeply appreciative. I don't know if some of those people are watching at this late hour there, but we appreciate that. Thanks to Emma and Mark out here, but for the beautiful music, for the flowers. I can go on and on. So many, many thanks. Also, as you probably saw in the program, if you're so inclined, there's 2 places to make charitable contributions in honor of my father. One with the USAP Community School, which is in Zimbabwe. My sister runs and founded. The other, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, which is close to home here in San Francisco, just around the corner. Like I said, the mark of someone's life often is, I mean, you can see it represented in this room, and there's people from all over, and it's not just, I mean, people came obviously from San Francisco, but we have obviously a whole side of the family from Zimbabwe. Esther came from Kenya. We live in San Diego. We have people from Boise. Jeannie came from Hawaii on very short notice. It's my father's goddaughter. People from Redding, Petaluma area, Santa Barbara area, Santa Cruz. A friend of Rebecca's from Phoenix. Couldn't be here today, but flew in a couple days ago to express his condolences. You know, we have some family that was unfortunately trying to come from Sacramento, got caught in major traffic and couldn't make it. And so it's just, the list goes on and on. So we have people here from all different walks of my father's life. He was 98 years old. And the first thing I think we should celebrate and honor is getting to 98. I mean, there are a few people here that I've met that are over 100 in the Sequoias, and it's just an incredible achievement. And so because of that, he lived a long, very fruitful life and met a lot of people, and so we kind of have this intersection here. I'm going to give you just a little bit, and some of you probably read the obituary that my mother wrote very eloquently. And there's some of these details are in there. I'm just going to give you some background about my father's life. And then we're going to have some people from different parts come up and speak. And so I think by the end you'll have a real appreciation of who he was and what he stood for. So he was born in 1927. I don't know if anybody here was born in the 1920s. That's a long time ago, obviously. He was born in Los Angeles. My daughter and I were just in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and I can't even imagine what it was like back then. But he grew up there in the La Cañada area, which is near Pasadena in the foothills. He's an only child, but his mother was one of 5 sisters, and they all had kids. Some of them here today, speak later, and it sort of branched out this family. So he wasn't just this one person. He grew up with lots of cousins. He went to Los Angeles Senior High School, which still exists. We drove by it the other day. It might be the oldest school in Southern California. It's one of them. And he went straight from there to Stanford. He was 16 years old. 16. Yeah, I can't even imagine being 16 and trying to go to college. But this is during the war, and the war interrupted a lot of college educations, and it did with him. And after 1 quarter, he realized, you know, I'm going to get drafted. I think I should just enlist. And so he enlisted in the Navy. And he went to San Diego, which is where I've lived for the last 35, 40 years, for basic training. And he got put on a flat-bottomed, very old ship and sent to Pearl Harbor. And he's thinking, why are we on this flat bottom, which meant you're bouncing around like a cork in the ocean, ship? Why are we taking it to Pearl Harbor? And I asked him once, I said, what was it like? And he said, I was seasick for 2 weeks, as you can imagine. Got to Pearl Harbor, and he's like, what are we doing with this ship that I'm attached to? And he started hearing the term Bikini Island and testing. He kind of got cold feet. And what was happening was, at that time, the Navy was testing the latest and greatest bombs, and they did it on Bikini Atoll. And they took ships and they put them in sort of concentric circles outside, you know, 1 mile, 5 mile, 10 mile, 20 miles, and they put various things on them, including human beings, and just tested to see what the effects of the bomb would be. He got cold feet and said, I don't think this is a good idea. And because he was a college student, he knew how to type. And so he looked for jobs on base as a desk assignment. And he found an officer who had the same last name. I'm not sure we ever found out if he spelled it the same. Probably not.
No, he didn't.
He didn't. But that got him the job. That's what he claims. And so he stayed on base and did not go with his ship. And you know, he lived to be 98. I don't think a lot of the other people who were on that ship lived past their 60s because of the radiation. We don't know for sure, but that was a stroke of genius and luck. So he returns to Stanford, he graduates, he goes to NYU to business school, and he is thinking of a career, you know, obviously in business of some type. He told me, and we don't know for sure if this was the defining moment, but he went and saw Death of a Salesman, and it altered his viewpoint of life, and decided to pursue what he wanted to pursue, what his love was. And he was a very cosmopolitan person, spoke Spanish, studied in Latin America, and so he followed his heart. And so he worked for the U.S. Information Agency in Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, and did that for several years. And now it's time to come home, and so you can just take a ship back north and come to California. And he said, no, I'm going to go the long way. So he got on a bus, went across South America, got on a freighter to Cape Town, started hitchhiking, and met some photographers who were shooting photos around and needed someone to carry their equipment, and was with them for weeks. Eventually got on another ship up the eastern coast of Africa, and then got to Lake Victoria, and got on another boat up the Nile. This is pre-dams, and got to the Mediterranean, and got to Europe, and came home, and came back to San Francisco. He spent a few years here working, and then was taking trips because he loves to travel, and was in Europe. And one day he's in Spain, and is it Palomas is the name of the city? He's in a travel agency. My mother happens to be in this travel agency. I don't know how many of you have heard this story. You should ask her about it later. She'll give you all the details. And says, you know, she overhears him saying, I'm going to this city, and he's going in the same direction, and says, well, I have a car, I'll give you a ride. Well, they were married for 64 years. In the early 60s, they moved to Hawaii. So he goes back to Hawaii. And as a side note, I'll tell you one story that kind of rings in my mind is we were in Maui one year just on a family vacation. And there's the old hotel, which is no longer with us, unfortunately, because of the fires next to the banyan tree. And he is in Hawaii at a time, again, LA in the 1920s, Hawaii in the 1950s. No roads, no paved roads, no tourists, no planes coming in, no hotels other than this one really. And so he was just staying in this hotel, and the manager or barkeeper, someone said, hey, I've got a car, and it's just dirt roads, but if you want to go adventure, the key to the car is on a nail. It's right behind the bar. Just take it whenever you want. So we were back there years and years later. We looked behind the bar, and there's still a nail. I thought that was pretty cool, and I could only imagine what that was like. So they're in Hawaii through most of the 60s. That's where I was born. That's where my sister was born. She got a Hawaiian middle name. I did not. I'm not quite sure about that. And then in 1969, moved back here to his alma mater, Stanford. And he worked at the Bechtel International Center for almost 20 years, overseeing the foreign students at the university, graduate and undergraduate, along with all the services, activities, programs. You can imagine that center was a big part of our lives growing up. We spent a lot of time there. Can I tell a story about its not soup? We once went there to give you an idea of the cosmopolitan upbringing. We went, they would have dinners, Sunday suppers, and we went, and somebody made a meal, and my sister, who's very outspoken, said, oh, I like this soup. The lady said, "It's not soup." In fact, we were horrified. Not the first time. But it was a great upbringing. I mean, it exposed the students from all over the world. As you can imagine, Stanford has them from everywhere. And he was sort of the bedrock in growing that office, and it is what it is today. He was the president of NAFSA. He was the president of the National Council for International Visitors. My mother found his resume digging through his desk a few days ago. I sent it to me, and I opened it up, and I mean, there was stuff in there that my sister and I had no idea about that he had done. Papers he'd written, committees he'd been on, councils he'd been on, and it was just incredible the impact he had in that field of international education. He's, and as you'll hear from the different people who speak today, he was known to different people for different things. And for many of us in the family, he was, and you used the word in an email you sent to us, the patriarch of the family. And this is a big family because when you have 5 sisters, and they all have kids, and they all have grandkids, and it starts to spread its tentacles. At 98, he was the patriarch. So for many people, he was viewed in that way, and you'll hear from Lori about that a little bit more. He was known, obviously, for his work with foreign students, and you'll hear from some people who worked with him in that field. He was known, he took early retirement in 1987 and consulted and still was very active. But he worked a lot with Cuba. He taught several classes about Cuba at the Frum Institute at USF. Took multiple trips to Cuba. So some people knew him for that. Some people know him as a philanthropist and activist, very, very obviously very generous, very committed. He liked to paint. I remember in our house at Woodside, the basement, he had a little workshop, and it was where all his framing was. And framed all the photos in our house, and it was just sort of a hobby. Liked to garden, and Rebecca's pig wasn't eating what he had gardened. He did Tai Chi, and there's people here from that group, and you'll hear from Nora speaking about that. And he was just, in closing, I just say, I think everyone knows, and again, people know him for different things, but I think everyone would know him for is just, he's a very calm soul. That's the word that keeps coming to my mind. He lived a very long, very, very long and impactful life. And I think that was the one thing that the common thread through all these different journeys and endeavors, hobbies, is that the kindness of his soul was something that I just felt, flowed through, and that we probably all felt in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so we're going to have some speakers. Before we do, I thought it would be nice just to have a moment of silence, and not in a sad way, but in a way where we could just think of your happiest, fondest memory of my father. And whether it's from interaction with him or interaction through his children or through his grandchildren or through my mother, through anyone. I think that would be just nice to think of a happy thought and remember him that way, and then we'll hear from some other people. Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think John is first.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
I don't know how I got chosen to be first. Well, this is a real honor to talk about Lee. I succeeded Lee at the Beckler International Center for one reason only. When Lee left, the university said, never again can a man with a head of hair like that ever run an office on the campus? So, here I am. I'm going to start and end with a kind of context with England, where I'm originally from. Those of you, and those of you from Zimbabwe will know, cricket is God's game. And there's a saying in cricket that somebody had a good innings, and Lee had a great innings. Not just in terms of how old he was, but what he did, what he achieved, who he influenced over those many years. And anything I say about Lee is about Peggy, it's about Mark, and it's about Rebecca. So I was asked to talk about two aspects of Lee's life. One, the international community, nationally and globally, and then his remarkable influence at Stanford with the International Center. I use a quote, but I honestly can't find if anybody actually said this quote. But apparently Eisenhower said it once. And it was all in the 50s about summits. And he basically said, to heck with summits. It's the meeting at the base that matters. And I think that was Lee's life, bringing people together from various cultures, various countries, various opinions. And getting them to communicate and interact. At the national level, NAFSA, which actually doesn't stand for anything anymore, but it stood for the National Association of Foreign Student Affairs. It started in the late 40s, but it really grew in the 60s and since. And I got an email earlier this week from a good friend of mine who I worked with professionally for many years, who'd heard the news about Lee, and he said, what a legend this man was. And we, yes, a legend in his lunchtime, as we would say in England, but he was. He not only stabilized NAFSA in the late 60s and early 70s, which was a remarkable achievement because it was a volunteer organization. And it took volunteers to stabilize it and help it grow. But he did something else, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people know about Lee. We talk about Lee with international students, but I actually think Lee's heart was in getting Americans to go overseas. And NAFSA didn't do that. So Lee really, not just on his own, but mainly on his own, cajoled and articulated and argued with NAFSA that there should be a section within that organization that is helping young Americans discover the world. And it became what we call SECUSA, the section on US students abroad. And somewhere, either in a garage in Boise or in a closet in Bechtel, I'm not quite sure where, there are all the original notes and memos about how SECUSA became an integral part of NAFSA, and still is, and the whole idea of Americans going overseas has grown dramatically. But when we come to the Stanford connection, and I told Lee this, Lee was the third director of the International Center. Werner Blombrun was first, Ken Cooper was second, Lee was third, I was fourth, and finally we got rid of the men, and Shalini on the fourth row back is the current director. But I used to tell Werner and Ken and Lee how lucky they were. Remember, he retired in 1987. No internet. If you wanted to discuss something, you had to meet people. There was no internet. There was very little graduate housing at Stanford. So where did international students congregate to meet? At the International Center. And there were very few regulations. And I can't underline the envy, I think, and I think I will talk to Shalini here, that we have for that era. where you dealt with people, you didn't deal with regulations, which have become the, I hate to say lifeblood, but almost of international offices. So, what did Lee do at Stanford that we still think about? The Bechtel International Center is one of the very few buildings at any American university that does what it does. It brings people together. Not just foreign students, but foreign scholars, faculty, American students, community members. Yale opened a similar office about 20 years ago. Why? Because some senior bigwig from Yale came to Stanford and visited Bechtel and said, we have to have one of those. But it's not just a building. And I think this is where Lee's contribution is at the top of the list. It's a kind of atmosphere. Things happen there. It was a meeting place. Which other international office in the country has a letter from Cesar Chavez saying, thank you for sending international students down to help the farm work? And that's just an example of the kind of work we did. But he made it a meeting place. Not always a happy meeting place. When you book New Year's Eve to both the Chinese students and the Taiwanese students, and neither will give, then you can see sometimes it's more interesting than fun. There were a couple of other things that I do want to say about Lee and Stanford. He was a mentor, a friend, a supporter of a remarkable organization at Stanford, the Community Committee for International Students, CCIS, founded in 1953, still going strong, and it's a remarkable supporter of international students. And if I could be comment fiscally for a minute, Lee's support of that organization in the years after Lee retired led to some remarkable contributions from members of that organization that have allowed Bechtel and certainly under Shawnee to offer support to international student groups. We have an endowment that was provided by a couple that met at Bechtel and got married. So we have a dating fund, and it just allows the support for groups, not just international student groups, but American students as well, who think internationally and globally. Lee also carried on his work from NAFTA in terms of the American student experience. Stanford, for many years, and still does, has an overseas studies program, but it's Stanford programs scattered around the world. Lee felt, no, that's not enough. Students need to do other things. So he started with a shoebox of study abroad programs and work abroad programs, and he developed it into what was the Overseas Resource Center, which is now the Office of Global Scholarships because of vagaries of Stanford's administrative processing. It now focuses on things like Rhodes and Marshall and Fulbright. And Lee was the Fulbright program advisor at Stanford for many years. And it's testimony to his work that I think it's almost 850 Stanford students over the years have been Fulbright students. But I do want to finish with another comment about Lee. Nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. Well, no, nobody's perfect. In the 1980s, after the United Kingdom had brought in full-cost tuition for international students, universities in the US were besieged by traveling British academics trying to recruit American students. And they used to come and see Lee. At one point, Lee said, I've had enough of this. I've got another one. You've got to see him. So I said, okay. So there's gentleman came in to see me, and we chatted. And I went and said, "You've no idea who that was, do you, Lee?" He said, "No." So in the same garage in Boise, I have 3 letters from a gentleman called Sir Roger Bannister, the first person to run the mile in under 4 minutes. So thanks to Lee, I had a pen-pal relationship. So, you know, to summarize and sum up Lee's gifts at Stanford, it was people are more important than policies, and relationships are more important than regulations. And it's still a battle. I hope I fought it well after Lee, and Shannon Lee is doing the same, that we need to bring people together, and Lee was as good at that as anybody I've ever known. So I'm delighted to have been able to say a few words. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, the Bechtel International Center was somewhere that we spend so much of our time, and where my sister was married as well, so I wanted to point that out. Next we have Nora, who is part of the Tai Chi group, and I hope you'll talk about the breakfasts. I was fortunate enough to come to a few of those.
So I'm going to talk about a really different side of Lee. I met Lee back in 1987 when he had just retired from Stanford, and we both joined the Cloud Hands West Tai Chi group. And he became an integral and beloved part of our group. He could be a little bit curmudgeonly sometimes, and he had very strong opinions. So, for example, he despised Frida Kahlo. So every time he saw a portrait of her, he would go, "Oh, that woman!" And you know, he had an expression on his face that could curdle milk. And we like to tease him about Frida Kahlo. In fact, I'm wearing my Frida Kahlo socks today. But yeah, he was a very beloved part of our group. And we always wondered why such an accomplished human being would be seen among us. But he loved being with us. We went to these workshops twice a year. We had a talent show. He loved to perform. He would make up stories, poems about our group. He would, we had one of our friends, a woman named Wanda Ford, was our treasurer for many years. And so he made up this, to the tune of Matilda by Harry Belafonte. You know, Matilda, she takes the money and goes to Venezuela. It was Miss Wanda, she takes the money and goes to Las Vegas. So that was Lee. I mean, he was a hoot. But he was also just, you know, he was more interested actually in the breakfasts than the Tai Chi. And he was always pushing us to, you know, get on with it already and let's go have breakfast. So, but another part of Lee was that he was a real mentor to me. Some of you who don't know me, I am a retired immigration attorney, and of course, Lee's major accomplishments at Stanford and with international students and his knowledge about the world was a tremendous influence on me. And I introduced him to my employer, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and subsequently he became a very generous donor and a member of the board. And I'm very grateful to him for that. And another sort of personal note, when Lee first met my husband, Mike, Mike and I had just started dating, and we were having lunch at a cafe on Sutter Street, and Lee happened to walk by. And he stared in the window with that curdled milk expression to see if Mike was worthy. So that was Lee. What else did I want to say? There was a time when Lee decided that as a gift to Peggy for, I think it was your 70th birthday, he was going to have a book published of her writings for the Historical Society. But he didn't want her to know what he was up to. So we put Mike and I up to being the contact for the publisher. The publisher would call us, and then we would call Lee, and then he would find a time when he could talk to them without Peggy knowing what was up. So we played a role in that. We were very happy to do that. And I just want to mention too that Eric Cohen, who's here, he's the executive director of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, often had lunch with Lee, and he would talk to me about how Lee was kind of intimidating a little bit, and he could be, but it always made me smile because when I thought of Lee, he was just a hoot. He was just a really fun, wonderful, joyous, creative, happy man, and a great friend. So thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Next we have Jeannie Fraser, but Margaret, you changed. Okay. So I just want to say, first of all, again, Jeannie moved mountains to be here, and we are so, so grateful that she's here. She's my father's goddaughter, but in terms of their relationship, there is no God. And I don't mean that in a sacrilegious way. She's a daughter. She is like a sister to us, and was really very, very dear to my mother's heart. And so thankful you're here. And you can say a few words. Your sister Margaret is sitting right here next to her.
Thank you. You've got me crying before I even start. And I'm having to work from notes, so forgive me. The only good thing about Alzheimer's is that one is provided with the opportunity to tell the patient how loved they are and how they've impacted your life. I shared this with Lee soon after his diagnosis, while he was still able to understand the place he has, present tense, in my life. I'm a lucky gal. I had more than one father, and Lee was one of my extra dads. I somehow knew that he would be the last of my dads to pass on, and that his passing would leave the biggest hole in my heart. He's been there since the beginning, making sure my parents moved to San Francisco, so I was born and raised here, and then standing up for me when I was baptized in the hate, making me one of the few Presbyterians with a Jewish godfather. And he took advantage of that. And I stood up for him as the only child at his wedding to Peggy, where I made sure that they cut the wedding cake properly. Even now, I cannot think of Lee without thinking of Peggy right by his side. When I was younger, Lee was a source of benevolent mystery. He would send exotic gifts from a magical place called Honolulu. It didn't hurt that the folk singers, Peter, Paul, and Mary, had a song about him, the land of Honolulu. And of course, that was where Lee lived, along with Puff the Magic Dragon, and beaches, and music, and love. And he had a keen sense of humor. He would send gifts that would delight me and drive my parents nuts. One of those was a plastic ukulele and my first transistor radio, which as a preteen I adored and I still have. And I still remember my parents' consternation when I unwrapped the gift. He found and framed a photo of a man's foot and leg breaking through the ceiling drywall. He had been sent up to the attic in the Woodside house to fix something, slipped off one of the braces, and came down right over Lee's head as he was reading the newspaper. let's see, I lost my place. Oh, and then there was the white elephant toaster that started out as one of these things you get. You can find them often in the Mexican groceries that you put over a heat source and lean the toast up against, and then you have to flip it when it's done. Well, he started giving that back to us every year. And finally, the last time I saw it, my dad had made one out of sheets of silver and delivered it in a Tiffany's box. Lee was always a soft place for me to fall and a constant source of encouragement and support. The house in Woodside was the landing pad for the Fraser family as we transitioned from one overseas assignment to another. And when my parents were on a distant continent, which happened a lot, Lee and Peggy always made sure I had someone to celebrate birthdays and the holidays, and a place to go on school vacations. I know I was not the only student recipient of the Zeigler's generous hospitality. Lee was an inspiration who encouraged my social activism, my love of travel and world cultures. He made a point of walking his talk by speaking out for those less fortunate and by supporting worthy organizations and actively forging bonds and friendships across cultures and national borders. I once asked Lee how someone who served both the Navy and the State Department came to be such an activist for peace. He said that the Quakers had taught him there was another way. I think back and I see snapshots of my godfather, and you may have seen some of those just now too. Sporting a bushy, and I'll say cheesy, mustache in the 70s, along with that hair for which he actually was a hair model for a stylist in Palo Alto. Teasing my father, which no one else dare do. Dancing the Macarena at a street festival in Mountain View. Showing me his watercolors and sketches after vacation abroad. Oh, his love of brute aftershave. It was, Peggy, shaking your head. It was. Experimental pancakes on Sunday mornings and mystery ingredient soups on rainy days. Traveling to Cuba before it was cool. Sharing a new taste thrill, which often involved chocolate and or ice cream. Imitating Steve Martin and walking like an Egyptian outside the King Tut exhibit with Rebecca and her granddaughters. Walking ever so proudly. Sorry, it's time to feed the cat. Walking ever so proudly down the aisle at Mark's wedding. His excitement when John Grisham had a new book out, and even more excitement when it was made into a movie. Extending his hospitality to students, colleagues, and acquaintances who would turn into lifelong friends. I've been missing Lee as he has slipped away from us. Okay, here's the hard part. But what I miss most is the delight and love in his eyes when we would meet even after only a short separation, and the warm abrazo that always meant welcome home. Ahui ho, Lee, aloha, and until we see you again.
Thank you. So I was there the day that her father went through the drywall. I was watching a football game, which is normally what I do on weekends. And my father had sent him up because anytime we had any kind of electronic or any kind of household stuff to get done, John was the guy who could do it. So he sent him up into the attic, and he's walking across the 2x4s, and he slipped, and all of a sudden this leg and this shoe comes through. And I look up, and I said, "Dad?" And he looks up and he goes, "Get the camera." That's how we got the picture. So thanks, Jeannie, and thanks for reading that. Next we have Lori. We also have someone from the family. I'm so excited that Lori is going to speak. She represents the Zeigler, well, not just the Zeigler, but Waldinger side of the family, but part of the Five Sisters empire. So she's going to say a few words. Thanks, Lori. And Lori was a really, really good basketball player when she was young. Who beat me?
That's in my notes. You just messed up my story, man. Oh, man. Yeah, at one time, believe it or not, I was actually taller than him. And, yeah, Mark and Rebecca came along and they took over my place as being the youngest in that generation. I'm still the youngest in most cases. My two brothers are here with me, and I am representing the family, or a part of the family anyway. There were 5 sisters. My grandmother and Lee's mom, Grace, were sisters. So that's the relation. My mom, who was Lee's first cousin, was more like a sister to her. Did that to him. They were sister and brother, really. Pardon me for being emotional. Whenever I talk about people I care about, this is what happens. I'm not a public speaker. Thank you, Rebecca. But yeah, there were the 5 sisters, and my mom and Lee grew up together, and they were like brother and sister as well, as first cousins. And he and my mom continued to be close their entire lives. Unfortunately, we lost our mom, 18 or so years ago now. And can you believe that? And Lee and Peggy were the most supportive people to my family and my mom for the remainder of her life after we lost our dad. My dad passed away 35 years ago. And wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. My mom was only 61 when my dad died. And Lee and Peggy just took over as being the people in her life that always looked out for her and took care of her. They were supportive to all of us, actually. Lee and Peggy came and supported me and my ex-wife at the legal wedding we were able to have in 2008. Finally, after we had already been together for 11 or 12 years at that point. Did the same thing with my cousin Bonnie, who got turned around coming from Sacramento today. She and her wife, who have been together 30 some odd years now, finally were able to legally marry in 2008, I guess, I think it was, or 2009, and Lee and Peggy, of course, showed up there and participated in that event. Just, that's how I think of Lee and Peggy, as just always being that foundation in our family, that staple, that was always there when you wanted them, when you needed them, and to support every event that we participated in. So that's the reason I was chosen to speak today, was because of the relationship between my mom and Lee, so close. I wrote a few things down because I didn't find out I was speaking today until just a few hours ago. I'm going to go back just a little bit to when I was really little, and my mom and dad, I grew up in Los Angeles. We were born in Los Angeles. And my mom and dad shipped me off to Lee and Peggy's in Woodside. And they probably went on vacation or something, but they did. And one of my oldest memories, that is my oldest memory of Lee and Peggy, actually. I don't know how old I was. I was maybe 10, something like that. And I remember us picking plums and making fruit rolls. I'll never forget that. And yes, that was the one time in my life that I was actually taller than Mark and beat him in basketball. I was a very good basketball player until everybody started getting higher and higher and higher. And I stopped. I did breed out my mom. My mom was only 4'11" and a half. But everybody in her family was so much taller. Even her 2 brothers were like 6 foot tall. Lee, everybody. But my mom somehow stopped at 4'11" and a half. And then, of course, I was thrilled when I outgrew her. But yeah, that's my oldest memory, is coming to Woodside, and you obviously remember that as well, Mark. I don't know if you would, but this Rebecca's, you're 4 years, we decided, you're 4 years younger than me, and you're like a year and a half younger than me, right? So anyway, my brother also reminded me today that two things. One brother reminded me that when his son was very little, he spilled red wine on a very white carpet. And for some reason that he still remembers that very clearly. The other thing, my oldest brother, Rick, he said Lee bailed him out of jail twice. In 1972, he was a student at San Jose State, and he was a protester. One of those, protesting the Vietnam War, I'm assuming, in 1972. And Lee had to come down and bail him out twice because, of course, the rest of us were all in Los Angeles still. So there's some fun stories there. I don't know a whole lot of them, to be honest. It's just, I just know that we all love Lee so much, and Peggy. And, you know, time gets away from us, but, you know, always in our hearts. And so I just wanted to say that in honor of the patriarch of our family, who is now with all of his mom and all of his aunts, you know, I think the age was Ruth was the oldest sister, and then was it Grace?
Frances, Ruth.
Oh, my grandmother was the oldest?
I think.
I thought Ruth was older than her. Anyway, I think it was Ruth, Frances, Grace, Lee's mom,
Yeah.
and then Honey, and then Florence.
Yeah.
Those were the 5 sisters. They all had kids. Florence only had one daughter, and then, of course, Grace had the one son, Lee, and then my grandmother, Frances, had 3 kids. Honey had 2 kids.
2.
And who am I missing?
Ruth.
And Ruth had 1. And Bonnie was my Aunt Ruth's, my great Aunt Ruth's granddaughter, who couldn't make it today because she was trying to get here from Sacramento. Anyway, so that's how it kind of works in the line of succession there. It was he was the last of that generation in our family, and that in itself is kind of a hard pill to swallow, you know. So anyway, I just love him so much, and you all very much. And thank you for hearing me out, as awkward as I feel. Cindy outgrew me.
Thanks very much for that, Lauren. Next we have Glenda, who was with my father in some of his final years. And so I would come up to visit, and one of my favorite things to do with my father was they would have an activities room, and Glenda was in the activities room, and I always liked, is Glenda going to be there today? Because it was always so much fun, and my father would perk up and love Glenda. So.
I wrote it all down. My first impression of Lee was of a dignified gentleman with a beautiful head of hair that Peggy always wanted to have cut. That I was always getting little arguments with her. In the activity room, he was quiet and he didn't say much, but when he did, he made his point. He had a sweet temperament with a sense of humor and sometimes sarcasm. He often made me laugh. He did not like doing exercises. Later on I found out from Peggy that he ran 5 miles a day, so I excused him. I was impressed with the amount of traveling he had done and the different places he had lived. Often, he would be in the activity room
or on our Monday scenic drives. With his eyes closed, I knew he was listening. I would often read about places, and he would answer when the conversation interested him. He enjoyed many forms of music. We had musicians perform for us in the activity room, as well as in the fireside lounge, or even here in the auditorium. One memory I have, I used to play word games with the residents. One game I did was fill in the letters for the missing words for the name of songs. And afterwards, I would look at Lee, and Lee would sing all the songs, perfect melody and perfect words. Every one of them, even though he was quiet the whole rest of the time. It was great. Let's see, where am I? He had a wonderful knowledge of countries, and he would often correct me on my pronunciations. I can tell that he had a life well lived by looking at him. I'm sorry he's gone, but I feel lucky and grateful to have known him. May his memory be a blessing.
Next, we're going to have my sister. One thing I wanted to say is Jeannie mentioned the hair. A lot of people mentioned the hair and being a hair model. So what would happen is barbers would ask him to come and they'd cut their hair and then he'd model it and they'd show off, see, I cut this hair, I'm a great barber. And anybody could cut his hair. So one day I went with him, he said, just drag me along. And one of the barbers didn't have a model and it didn't show up. And they're like, we need a model. And you go, oh, you can take my son. And the guy's like, oh, yes, you get a Zeigler. So he cuts my hair and he's like, it's not doing like your dad's. And he did not win the contest. So I don't think I got quite the hair. Anyway, my sister's going to share a few words now.
My dad is my hero. Dad taught me how to be a parent. I am so grateful that I've gotten to experience such a loving father. My childhood is filled with memories of Dad being present and bringing love, laughter, and joy to our home. To the extent that it's easy to forget, he was simultaneously a very busy professional. My mom was definitely the cook for our home, but each Sunday the kitchen was Dad's domain. Daddy would weekly make pancakes, waffles, or crepes. Army. Which Mom, Mark, and I would devour. He would be in the kitchen while we all ate at the counter, adamant that you had to have seconds and thirds, and you had to eat them when they were hot. Then later in the day, he would take whatever leftovers and chicken bones from the week he could find in the fridge, and he would concoct a big soup for lunch. And he would make the one dessert he became famous for, not only for us, but for all of his grandchildren, tapioca. To this day, no one can claim to make tapioca like Grandpa did. I'm not sure how the tradition started, but my father would sing me a song as my bedtime ritual every night. We had a song for each day of the week, mostly love songs from show tunes. Que sera, sera was Sunday. Fall in love, says my heart was Thursday, etc. And sometimes even when he was traveling for work, He would make an expensive call to the landline despite time differences over a very crackly line and sing my song for that night over the phone so I could sleep well. Mom and Mark loved sports, and they held season tickets for Stanford basketball and occasionally Stanford football as well. Dad and I did not share this love. So we went on our own alternate dates. Sometimes we'd go to the ice skating or roller skating rink, but most often we'd go to the movies, a very specific 1970s genre of movies that Dad chose, disaster movies. We saw all of them, Earthquake, Towering Inferno, Airport 70, 75, and 77, and our favorite, The Poseidon Adventure, many times. Dad would be carrying one of Mom's huge purses that she had packed for us to sneak in with a big bag of illicit homemade popcorn and a thermos filled with coffee for Dad to avoid the high food prices at the movie theater. I remember once that Daddy forgot his wallet and he had to convince the movie house manager to let us in, stating he didn't want to disappoint his little girl, but the movie had been his choice. Dad modeled for us how to be a loving husband. He loved my mother more than anything in the world, and they shared the joys and challenges of life together from the day they met at the bus stop in Spain through his long Alzheimer's journey, nearly 65 years of marriage. He always tried to make Mom's birthday special, even though it falls on Christmas, from the annual joke of wrapping up and gifting her a hotel shower cap, because she always forgot hers in places when we traveled, as a birthday gift, to making sure she got the Blum's Coffee Crunch birthday cake that she loved from Japantown for Christmas night. Dad was also an amazing son. He grew up an only child in the strict sense of the word, but not in actuality, as he was also raised in a closely knit neighborhood of cousins, aunts, and uncles in Los Angeles, like you heard. One of my favorite stories of his childhood was waiting for his mother and 4 aunts to be busy with their weekly bridge game accompanied by chicken salad sandwiches, and then sneaking out with his cousins, Bert, Lois, Joe, Patsy, and Susie, to a nearby chocolate factory. Leaving one of the cousins' guards, they would go over the fence, send several of us in to jump into the dumpster and retrieve rejected chocolates. Growing up, Dad would take our family every single week on a 90-minute trek to Lafayette to spend the day with his parents, our grandparents. We would feast on the delicious potato salad, chopped liver, brisket, and other Jewish delicacies that Grandma would prepare, with Grandpa teaching us how to play cards, mostly, what's the game he was playing?
Solitaire.
Not solitaire. I'm forgetting the game, but poker games. And with us falling asleep on the long drive home at night. He was always there for his parents and for his extended family. Dad taught me how to live with integrity and stand up to injustice. My first vague memories from childhood include being pushed in my stroller at protests. Later, as I grew, I would hear more stories of how my parents helped child victims of napalm get to Hawaii for treatment, and how they served as a safe house for conscientious objectors from the Vietnam War. Our fridge never had grapes. I still have my dad's Farm Workers Union shirt, nor did we buy Nestle products to abide by boycotts. He would explain why we made such choices to stand in solidarity with those who were being mistreated. When I took a deep breath and made the call home from Brown University to tell my parents 3 months before graduation that I might be suspended and not graduate after being arrested for civil disobedience in an anti-apartheid protest, instead of being angry, Dad told me he was proud of me. Several years later, when I was back in San Francisco, he and I were arrested together at a protest in front of the federal building when the US invaded Iraq. Dad always dressed in a dapper suit and tie for protests. He wanted to make the statement that all kinds of people from all kinds of life could stand up for injustice. On that day, he also joked with a twinkle in his eye that he had always wanted to go limp and let the police drag him away, which he subsequently did. Dad told us that you should enjoy life, but that you can also live without greed and give of your wealth generously. He and Mom consistently have donated generously to many causes they feel deeply about, both locally and internationally. Throughout my childhood, Dad modestly drove a white 1969 VW Bug, with a peace sign bumper sticker in the rear right window. When we advocated that a high-powered Stanford official should have a snazzier car, he didn't buy a new one, but instead he bought a black racing stripe decal, which all of the neighborhood friends came to witness. It became a group project in the driveway to install it carefully so as not to get bubbles under the sticker. Dad demonstrated by example how one can follow professional goals to forge a career that makes a positive difference in our world. Without us ever talking about it explicitly until much later in life, I don't find it coincidental that I followed his path in so many ways. Traveling to and exploring places far from home at a young age, pursuing the study of cultures and peoples, Dad Latin American studies, and me African studies. Mastering languages, Dad was fluent in Spanish and dabbled in others, and discovering international education as a key to transforming lives. We grew up piling into Dad's VW bug to Stanford for potluck Sunday suppers, organized by student groups from various countries, and meeting students and subsequently hosting friends of my parents from literally all over the globe. Dad's career in international education was deeply linked to both his passions and his beliefs, and he showed us as kids and our children, his grandchildren, that one can make those connections for a life of impact and purpose. He showed me that education is the one gift that no one can ever take away. Dad loved travel, and he encouraged us to explore, demonstrating and explaining the need to leave one's home in order to truly understand it. Dad also taught me how to be a leader. So many recollections of watching him direct the International Center have stayed with me as I have grown into a leadership position, founding and directing an organization. As a child, I can remember our dial phone at home ringing on a weekend, the resident graduate student couple living upstairs at the Eye Center calling because there was a blocked toilet. Dad grabbed our toilet plunger and me, I usually loved to join these escapades, and off we zoomed in the bug. That image of my father mopping the bathroom at the same time that he was directing a staff of nearly 20 or meeting a college president is not lost on me. Neither is his bringing plants to replace dead ones or to supplement the what he called inadequate job he thought Stanford had done in the flower beds at the entrance of his building, or framing art in our garage to hang on the off walls of the Eye Center. When Reneth and I got married in the back garden of his office, Dad made all of the table flower arrangements himself. I'm sure he would have done the same here if he had been with us today. Dad taught me that you lead by being with people, not on top of them, by doing what is in no one's job description but simply needs to get done. Dad was always present for his international students, picking them up at the airport if they were stranded, inviting them for Thanksgiving if they had nowhere to go, attending their events when they invited him. It is not surprising to me that in the decades after they graduated, and many had risen to high ranks in their different respective countries, they would invite my parents to visit. They literally had people to see anywhere in this world that they traveled, whether Micronesia or Uganda, Brazil or Argentina, Italy or Japan. One professional highlight was presenting at a panel at a NAFSA conference together with my father, a look at 50 years of international education through the eyes of our two generations. And I'll go off script because John reminded me of another NAFSA favorite story. I was with my dad at a NAFSA conference in Salt Lake City when he wanted to host a Cuba party for all the people he had brought to Cuba. So at that time, Salt Lake City was a dry city. So he brought the rum in his suitcase, and then he strong-armed Marlene Johnson, the president of NAFSA, to use her executive suite, and we had a wild Cuban mojito party. My dad also brought the blender in his suitcase. And we had a mojito party in the suite with all those who had been to Cuba. Dad lived out loud in a contagious way. What he loved, those around him would also grow to love. He had a wicked sense of humor, stopping to dance the Macarena in a safe way when he heard the canned version playing, or making what I later learned are now a trending genre, dad jokes. He loved his food, and no meal was ever complete without dessert. My dad had a very green thumb, and he lost himself in cultivating our house full of plants. Every summer he nurtured an incredible vegetable garden, which we would eat from for months. He was an artist, always carrying a small watercolor set and sketch pad wherever he traveled to capture scenes. So much of his art we now enjoy in our home, and it's a constant reminder of him, as are the talents of his granddaughter Grace, who would draw alongside him. Dad led with kindness, a default of fun and humor, of joy and realizing there was always something new to discover, be it food, people, or place. He taught so many of us to love others and to love life. My dad is my hero, 98 years well lived. We're going to miss him dearly. We'll live out loud and with intention to honor him.
Thank you for that. One thing, you mentioned his running, and you mentioned his not love of sports. When he was at Stanford, they had a program, and they wanted to test whether running would reduce cholesterol in the subjects. But they needed a control group, they needed a running group. And so he said, well, of course, I'll volunteer. I'll never get picked for the running group. He was so convinced. Well, of course he got picked for the running group. And he got to go run every day at Angel Field, 5 miles a day, and then get tested. And so that was kind of a funny way that happened. He hated it, but he did it. Next, we're going to have the granddaughters. We have no grandsons, we have granddaughters. All four are going to come up. I'll introduce them. Grace, oldest, here. Esther, Margaret, and Lisbon.
Sorry, we're changing the order. We're here to just share some memories of our grandpa. I'm sure you'll hear between the four of us his legacy living on, his passion for creativity, his love of learning, his passion for activism, that is alive in all of us. And yeah, we're each gonna just share a memory that's close to our hearts, and hopefully they'll touch you in some way as we remember him today. So I think out of the four of us, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who kind of got his creative genes. The others try, but it seems to be just me. And I have such amazing memories from being a little girl and painting with my grandfather on our veranda back in Zimbabwe, back home, as well as up on the deck at my grandparents' apartment in San Francisco. And what came to me actually as I was thinking about what I would speak about was this memory I have, which kind of touches on what Cousin Jeannie was talking about, of Grandpa getting me a gift my parents were not super jazzed about. So we often came down to Japantown to hang out, to eat, because it's walking distance from the apartment. And there was this huge book called The Monster Book of Manga that I would always flip through every time we went down to the bookstore. And it had all kinds of crazy creatures. And at that stage, I was very convinced I was going to be like drawing comics of scary monsters, and that was going to be my thing. I was about 13. And my parents said, we're absolutely not buying that for you. It's huge. It's going to be half our suitcase. There's no way. And I would stare at it longingly and flip through it. And let's just say it was under our Christmas tree that year. Grandpa had snuck out and got it for me. And I still have it in my apartment to this day. He often had little ways like that of supporting, my creative pursuits. And that's the memory I thought I'd share. I'm gonna pass on to Lisbon now.
Yeah, so I have two short memories to share about Grandpa. The first one is that every time that I would receive a holiday or birthday card from my grandparents, it's really small, but they would always sign it, "Love Grandma y Abuelo." And I think that really underlines the importance and the value that Grandpa placed in exploring abroad and the importance of language. And so I also was fluent in Spanish, and I think that he really inspired me to know the importance of being able to communicate with people from all over and wanting to travel and explore the world, especially with all the stories he would tell of his exploits abroad. And then my second memory is what Auntie Becca was talking about. Every time that I'd come visit, he'd always have a thing of tapioca ready for us. And I think my dad and I both really shared his sweet tooth, and we'd get really excited to eat his tapioca, and then he'd also help us sneak other sweets, including the See's candy butterscotch lollipops, which are also my favorite. Yeah.
I think I'll popcorn off of Lisbon's last thing about the sweet tooth, because out of my side of the family, I had the biggest sweet tooth, and I feel like Grandpa was my biggest advocate. After dinner, everyone would be full, and I would always say, "Well, what's that?" And then we would go, and he would let me get unlimited toppings on my ice cream and everything. And I think one of my favorite memories, and one of our last memories when we were still at 2171, was Grace and I always used to come for Thanksgiving, my early college days. And there was a time that Grace came about 2 days later. So it was my first time being the only grandchild. And one day, Grandma was cooking dinner, and Grandpa said, "Why don't we go for ice cream?" And Grandma said, "Only get one scoop." So we walked down the hill all the way to Fillmore, and I would just yap and talk, and Grandpa would just nod and walk and give me a few insights. But we went and we got ice cream, one scoop each, and we sat. And I remember we would just sit and eat our ice cream quietly. And then I remember he looked at me, and I was telling him about undergrad, and he said, "I wonder how Quakerism is going to change you." And I was so confused. I was like, "What?" And then he just said, "Should we go get another scoop?" And then we went and we had another scoop, and of course we were full for dinner, but we never told Grandma until today. But I think when I was thinking about that, I realized over the past couple of days how much actually Grandpa and I had in common, in the sense that I went to Indiana, rural Indiana, and that's where my great-grandparents ended up when they first came to America, and that's where I studied. Grandpa had a whole experience with Quakerism that changed his life and told him about peace and activism, and I had that experience, but in different times. And I think now, thinking back to Grandpa saying, "How would Quakerism change you?" Now I'm like, oh, okay, you were seeing something that I didn't even know was happening to me. So I think, that's what I wanted to share.
I'm the last grandchild to speak, Margaret, named after my grandmother. One thing I'd say about Grandpa is we, out of I think everyone, had the same temperament. So he was kind of the observer, the listener, and that was me. Like everyone, our family's very chaotic in general. There's a lot of us when we all meet up, and like I'm just kind of there, just like listening, taking it in, and he was kind of the same. So we would both be there together, sort of taking things in. And I'll share two memories I have, and it kind of explains that we have the same temperament about things. The first one was when we went to Mauritius as a family. I would wake up, I think I was about 9, and I would wake up every morning with Grandpa to watch the birds. So at the time in school, I was studying birds, and I was very interested in multiple areas of things. And one thing that I don't think was mentioned was that he was an avid bird watcher, and he loved birds. And so every morning we'd sit out on the deck, and we would watch the birds together. And he would tell me like, oh, this is this type of bird, and that's a warble, and I would write down every single bird we saw. And these guys were like sleeping, and it was just the two of us out there like watching the birds, and I'd write down all the birds. And yeah, those little moments like that we shared together, away from sort of like the chaos, away from the noise of the family. Something else was, I remember I had really long fingernails, and Grandma would get annoyed if we had long fingernails at times. And so Grandpa was the one that was in charge of cutting my fingernails. So whenever we'd go there for Christmas holidays or whatever holidays, and my fingernails were too long according to Grandma's standards, Grandpa would take me up on the deck with all his plants and everything, and he'd cut my fingernails. And we'd be up on the deck, and he'd be cutting my fingernails. So yeah, that's a cute little memory I thought I'd share as well. But now I think we're going to open it to the floor. Thank you for everyone who spoke today and shared memories of our grandfather. And if you would like to share a brief reflection or memory of him, then you can come forward, or I can bring the mic to you. And yeah.
Thank you guys for that. Is there anybody who'd like to share anything? Anybody who has a particular memory that quick, got you?
Mark? He quit that running because it had no impact on his class.
No.
Yes. Or so he claimed.
There's someone, no.
Oh, I'll bring the microphone to you.
My name is Marilyn Herron, and I met when we lived in Honolulu, and my husband was in the music department and at UH, and he was, of course, we talked at the intermission always, and he was telling me about a program that he had coming from the Yucca Islands, and he needed a director for it, and I was not in the field of international students and scholars and cultures and all of that, but I did live in San Francisco my life before that, so I had a little bit of diversity in my blood, and I said I would be really interested, and so he hired me, and that started a lifelong interest for me in international programs. And when I worked for him at the ISO for all of our years there, and then I think you all left the year after we did, and we went to Europe because my husband was European, and so we went there for a year, and we had 2 children at that time, Amy and Mark, another Mark, and they knew Rebecca and this Mark, and the girls kept in touch with each other via the old snail mail, and all the years we lived in different places, the girls were communicating, and so when I moved back to the Bay Area, I think it was that then we contacted them and started our friendship again, and at that time he asked me if I would be interested in joining the board of an organization that he was affiliated with, which was the Council of International Programs, which was an exchange program with people started after the Marshall Plan and in the 50s, and that program went on for quite a lot of years, and I directed that, and then the next thing he said that he was affiliated with Fulbright, and would I consider being involved in that board, and I absolutely would be interested, so I joined the Fulbright board, and then he hired me to direct the cultural program in the Bay Area, and I did that for 18 or 20 years, I think. So he was very much my mentor, and I really appreciated Lee. I learned lots of things about him today that I didn't know that were fun and enhancing, I must say, but not surprising. So I just want to say how much we will miss him, and I hope we will all that were influenced by him, all of us here obviously, that we keep that spirit of his going and just keep loving other people and working for peace and doing the things we know we need to do. And somehow we'll get through this next phase.
Thank you so much. We have time for one or two more. Oh, okay. I'm coming over to you.
Well, I also work here at the Sequoias in the Life Enrichment, and I first knew Lee. I wasn't yet at the Life Enrichment at MCU. It was at, I think it was a pre-New Year's festivities that we had at the health center, and he sat right next to me with someone. And when we started, we had a band, and when we started singing, he started singing along, and you all have heard about his art and everything about activism, but he has a real crooner voice. I mean, he could croon. I said, wow, you should sing professionally. And even when I started working at the MCU, where he was more the resident there, of course I was always impressed, and I knew that his favorite was Some Enchanted Evening. So whenever we have a chance, I always introduce a chance to have him to sing Some Enchanted Evening from South Pacific. And now that I know of his background of that love of culture and activism, even more so important for him that he loved that musical South Pacific. And of course, the other thing that I must mention is the impact both Peggy and Lee had on me, and how beautiful their relationship was. So there was never a day that I would not see Peggy there. And you should see your dad's, Lee's eyes really light up when she comes to visit, and he's always waiting for her to drop by, and I think a day will not be complete for him if Peggy didn't visit, and she was always there, even just holding hands with him, listening. You know, he was always quiet, as Glenda had said, but I knew he was assimilating, and in his mind, he would every so often just voice up an opinion or so. And I always really, really treasure having known your dad and Peggy, lovely couple that you were. Thank you.
Thank you. One last memory somebody has? Yes, coming back.
Hello, my name is Jake. Jimmy Bo's son, Jimmy, and Lois is my grandma, cousin of Lee. Hi. Sorry. I came a little late with the kids, and I apologize for that, but I heard what Lori said from our family, but I just wanted to say, Lee and Peggy were these mythical people for us, in my family. And every Christmas getting their letter was a big deal, you know what I mean? And there was just something about Lee and Peggy that it just felt different, and it's really been an honor for myself and my sister who's not here right now, to know them. And I'm sure, Lori might have said this, but my grandma passed away, and they take care of her in the ways that they didn't have to, and I always appreciate that. Yeah, and he had great hair too. He did. But I just love when Lee and Peggy would come to our house. I can picture them at our kitchen table, and they meant a lot to us. I mean, I'm trying to explain to my kids who they are. They're my grandma's cousin. I mean, what does that even mean? But it means a lot, and they really had a big part in our life. So I just wanted to share that. And thanks for having us here. It's Margaret. Okay, we're gonna have a few words from my mother, and then we're gonna eat.
Oh.
I just want to thank all of you for coming and honoring Lee. And I want to thank all my family for also gathering round from all over the world and have heard. And I hope you'll join us outside the door here with some refreshments. Many of them things that were particularly favorite foods of Lee's, and we like most of them. Some sushi, some shrimp, cupcakes, and of course, Lee's lollipops. And last but not least, I hope some of you will take home these anthurium that are lining the stage. They're potted, so they're easy to transport. And I think that I want to thank you again for coming, all of you from all over. And we miss Lee, but he had a wonderful 98 years. So he had a happy life. Thank you.
Yeah. And the food's right outside, so we can just move outside. There's some tables and should be set up.
Thanks. Should I put it in my two bags?
No, I'll take What? Oh no.